topic of this presentation is Canonic composers and commercial motifs, classical pieces on the silver screen. Film is a visual art, often act as a canvas upon which modern composers practice the art of composition and scoring. Music is an inseparable part of the film that has counterpart relationship with each other to support the narrative and story of the film. Classical music played an important role in the motion picture since the silent film era. The aim of this presentation is to address the role of classical music of Canonic composers in films and to discuss the issues that has been argued for decades on why filmmakers use classical music and how original and artful is using classical music in films with commercial intention. In this presentation, I will discuss the use of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, Beethoven's 7th and 9th Symphony, Richard Strauss's The Spoke Zarathustra, Johann Strauss II's Blue Danube Waltz in details, and a few more classical works to support my arguments. In our times, narrative film seems to be the most prevalent artistic and entertainment form. The story and narrative in a film allows the spectators to evaluate behaviors, emotions, and situations through a stimulated audiovisual environment. The story of any films mostly reflects the universal human experience and fantasies that a creator can have through those human experiences. Films can be classified into two categories: art films and commercial films, based on the purpose of the movie and other creative and commercial motives. However, the contrast between these two categories are very difficult to determine and often debatable. Art films are usually created to convey a deep meaning and explore the artistic horizon of artist-specific technique or technology, where the commercial films are purely made for entertainment purpose that target a vast class of spectators in the intention of making profits. Nevertheless, some films might have artistic meaning and commercial and entertainment values as well. While the product is a fantasy, the business is not. Professor Joseph Toro says, movies are created as an individual unit to be sold, marketed to the public through incredible marketing machine. Film is a collaborative effort between artistic sensibilities such as screenplay, cinematography, editing, VFX, music, art direction, Foley art, etc. However, music is an important artistic element in a film that contributes to increase the profit of the production and distribution house as an independent art form by streaming, selling music and music rights. A film and music has counterpart relationship where each art form supports and complement each other while they can stand on its own to express and convey artistic meaning as well. Communicative and narrative power of music serves to draw spectators' attention away from artificiality of the medium, thus humanize and to suggest emotions, atmosphere, character trait, period, or location setting. Moreover, its psychological implication of the music on the screen can make the same scene perceived differently with different music. Music has the ability to transform the meaning and nature of the scene by stimulating a lived space in our mind by triggering our auditory memory. Traditionally, music is used as a tool to unify sequence of different scenes and provide continuity and momentum, while supporting and enhancing the narrative of the film. Bernard Herrmann says in an interview, it's not possible to create a film without music, but you can create a film without good music. Music is very essential for a film, and any musical decisions or ideas are influenced by various factors such as nature of the scene, composer's creative exposure, director's vision, and target audience. Most directors do not meticulously plan out the score. In a filmmaking process, scoring always comes at the end. Until then, the temp tracks are used, which have been a popular technique used by the directors and editors during the editing phase of the post-production as a stand-in. The temp tracks are usually taken from pre-existing soundtracks, independent music, or any classical music, most commonly classical music. Using the temp tracks are helpful in some ways, but it could also lead into issues such as editing inaccuracies, sequence of shots being controlled by the music, and by the time a composer writes an original score, there can be difficulties in singing the new score with the editing rhythm. Not only this, but when a director is so used to the temp track, it might be hard for the director to accept new score for the scene, and mostly he's tend to ask the composer to mimic the music. These passages are common in many films. Such passage of Brahms can be similarly found in Godard's Les Mépris. Many film critics, composers, and writers denounce the use of classical music as an act of theft or artistic incapability of the composer. Music critic John Hunley views using the classical music in films as distraction to the audience, and American screenwriter Max Winkler implicitly states that the compilation of the classical music as an act of murder of the great composers like Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach. The development of sound film music started with original compositions that was tailor-made for the movies, but later the repetitions of thematic ideas of composers' previous work, borrowing ideas from classical and pop tradition, emerged. Not just the composer's stylistic choice of music, but also directors' and producers' influence caused extensive changes in the culture and nature of the film music. In an interview with Bernard Herrmann with Royal S. Brown, Herrmann says, "It's Hitchcock. He just wanted pop stuff." And I said, "No, I'm not interested." I told him, "Hitch, What's the use of me doing more with you? Your picture, your mathematics, 3 zeros. My mathematics, quite different. So, forget about it. I said, I had a career before and I will afterwards. Thank you. A composer's approach to a composition can be categorized into 2 streams. In the first, the whole piece is derived from any concept or idea that drives the process of composition, in which a small idea is focused initially, rather focusing on the whole piece, and the ideas are connected arbitrarily and schematically. Antonin Dvorak and Schoenberg are best fit into the first category. In the second type, the details of the development of the piece are derived from considering the wholeness of the piece. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Haydn's work are best exemplary of this type. The composers writing for the screen are urged to adopt the second type, where most works are made in order, driven by the story, narrative and sequence in a film. The classical music, by which I mean here is the long-established European music culture, except jazz, folk or popular tradition that has been identified to have a high artistic value. The classical canon of great composers have emerged recently and played important role in the development of Western music history from Baroque period to later period. Even though the term canonic is often debatable, I hereby take the implicit definition of Kerman, that is, a repertory that is kept in practice for several generations. Here the frequency of performance is not taken into account. A core classical repertoire of highly valued work of a set of composers has been performed by orchestras and opera companies around the world are identified as canonic composers. The expansion of core repertoire of this classical work resulted in the inclusion of composers such as Shostakovich, Ives, Hindemith, Strauss, Stravinsky, Britten, and Bartók as well. Classical music has been an inseparable part in the motion pictures since the silent film era. The use of classical music in sound cinema is considered as a shorthand to satisfy the dramatic need of a film. Often Chopin is a sure thing of romance, sadness or depression. Wagner goes with a big trouble and Mahler when someone is about to die, and Beethoven for anything romantic, dangerous, grandness and many more. Similarly, there is nothing better than Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor to introduce a spooky, nerve-wracking, monstrous and adventurous sound. Moreover, the treatment of these classical pieces in movies is either diegetic or non-diegetic, or evolving from one of these to the other. American film director Martin Scorsese's aesthetic choice and perfect synchronization of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor with the XF-11 test flight scene and the war scene in his film Aviator, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, is a great example of direct use of a classical music. In the flight test scene, Leonardo DiCaprio test drives a majestic-looking XF-11 aircraft that was designed to be the fastest long-range reconnaissance aircraft. Let's watch a scene from the movie Aviator.
Colonel Bertrand, thanks for coming down.
Odie, you reading me okay?
Yeah, Howard, you're A-okay. All right, flight controls are active. She's all yours.
Spotless, Odie. No wiggle on the wheel or throttle.
Take it easy. How's she sound, Howard?
She's whispering to me, buddy.
All right, make her sing.
She can fly.
Without music, this scene would create an expectation among the audience towards the achievement, victory of testing the aircraft's ability. However, Scorsese places Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, challenging the audience expectation that leaps into a mystery and to question themselves what's really gonna happen. Even though the piece is originally written for organ, the director uses transcription of large orchestra by Leopold Stokowski in 1927 to imply the ecstasy of Leonardo DiCaprio while piloting the majestic reconnaissance aircraft and the horrific air crash that is about about to happen afterwards. The majestic and sinister sound, dramatic authority, and driving rhythm of this piece portray the angelic as well as sinister nature of the aircraft. Similarly, opening of the 1932 film Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde, directed by Ruben Mamoulian, places an orchestral version of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor in the opening logo and the title credits, which thrilled the New York audience upon entering the theater with exceptionally spooky music. Here the purpose of the music is to establish a ghastly and macabre association of music with the opening credits, which one would expect in a horror movie. 1940 was another important year for the rise of this piece when Disney released an animation interpretation of great Western classical pieces, Fantasia. Parallel octaves of the opening, solo pedal statement of the fugal subject and the minor plagal cadence at the conclusion of the work, primitive harmony throughout the piece with voices moving in thirds and sixths only, making this piece a best fit to the previously mentioned movies and sequences. Composers and directors, they also tweak, alter, rearrange classical music as per the dramatic need of the film. The film composer Daniel Pemberton reprised the Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor with modern jazz and funk influence that matches the stylistic nature of the film in Ocean 8, directed by Gary Rose in 2018. Hans Zimmer took a fragment of the opening idea of the Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor and developed a similar sounding soundtrack for the scene where Kraken wrecks the Black Pearl and kills the crew members under the command of Davy Jones. Let's watch the Kraken scene from the movie Pirates of the Caribbean. Let's listen to the soundtrack of Ocean 8. Prominent appearance of Beethoven's music in films have been a tradition from the silent film era to present day. Kurt Wimmer, in his futuristic world that he created in his 2002 film Equilibrium, a controlling totalitarian regime believes that emotions are the cause of all the problems and they constrain everyone to take emotional suppressing drug to neutralize it, along with strictly forbidding books, arts and music in order to prevent war. For a scene in which the protagonist, John Preston, played by Christian Bale, stumbles upon a recording of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and gets emotionally flooded. The incident became the turning point of his life to go against the regime. Carefully crafted shots, slow and steady camera movement and synchronized cut, warm color and outstanding performance of Bale along with the first movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that starts with the barren landscape created by perfect fifth that reflects the emotional emptiness of the protagonist and that is being broken, and then his mind transforms into a battleground of emotions where or when he feels like dopamine and serotonin swamped his mind at once to refresh his numbered emotions. Here the music is used as a diegetic element that add unspoken dialogue to the scene. Similarly, in 1971 movie Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick uses the second movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in diegetic setting, same as in the Equilibrium, but here the music is referred in a biblical context. Let's watch a scene from the movie Equilibrium. Let's watch a scene from the movie Clockwork Orange.
Bliss and heaven. Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh. It was like a bird of rarest spun heaven metal, or like silvery wine flowing in a spaceship, gravity all nonsense now. As I sluiced it, I knew such lovely pictures.
The other uses of Beethoven's music would be the movie Knowing, directed by Alex Proyas, uses an 8 minutes and 20 seconds long opening of the second movement of the Beethoven 7th Symphony for a montage scene. Beethoven's 9 Ode to Joy is used for the playground scene of the 1989 movie Dead Poets Society. In 2001 Space Odyssey, the iconic movie director Stanley Kubrick have used several pieces of classical music as temp tracks. Richard Strauss's orchestral tone poem The Spoke Zarathustra for the first glimpse of the earth rising from a black screen that introduces the title card, and later in a scene where we see a space station moving around the inky blackness of the infinite space, Johann Strauss II's Blue Danube Waltz was used as a temp track that is preloaded with beauty and deep meaning. Alex North, who is considered a true master of film scoring, scored these scenes with his original music conducted by Jerry Goldsmith and performed by 105-piece National Philharmonic Orchestra in London. But it's not all unusual for an originally recorded score to get thrown out by a director. Here is an interview of Jerry Goldsmith about the music of 2001 on Townsend television show in 1933.
She and Alex went to the premiere of the picture in New York, quite expecting to hear the music, and got there and surprised there's Strauss opening the picture, which was quite a shock.
Here, Kubrick have decided to keep the temp tracks in the movie. The King's Speech is a British historical drama directed by Tom Hooper. This movie was released in 2010 and won 109 awards, including the Academy Award and Golden Globe Award. In this movie, Tom Hooper used 5 classical masterpieces of Mozart, Beethoven and Brahms that is placed in several scenes in both diegetic and non-diegetic settings. In my opinion, each of these tracks extensively elevate the dramatic value of the scenes. Not just the above-mentioned films, but also number of other films uses the classical music as an integral part of the film. However, in the 5 decades of the film music scholarship, there have been arguments and questions about why does film uses classical music, and the aesthetic value of having classical music in a film score has always been debatable. In my view, often filmmakers tend to evoke a sense of familiarity and nostalgia to connect deeply with the spectators that could make the film more comprehensible, memorable, and make the viewers to feel emotionally connected. Music of great masters of the classical canon is immensely preloaded with emotions, philosophical context, and artistic and creative ideas that are already conversant to the spectators. Filmmakers have exploited these ideas in filmmaking. Moreover, from my personal experience as a film composer, creative crisis of a filmmaker is an unfortunate phase where the filmmaker might need some inspiration to keep his creative idea flowing. This could lead to the filmmaker to craft a story or scene that has inseparable connection with the classical music, which could be hard to be replaced by another music to bring out the same narrative features as the particular classical music. Moreover, director getting used to the temp track could be a reason to throw out the music, even the music of the great film composers, and to keep the temp tracks. Stanley Kubrick's 2001 is a great example of this. Considering the cost of music making, sometimes filmmakers plumps for the classical music or some pre-recordings because inherently all classical works before 1925 are public domain, which means the music or the particular recording belongs to the public as a whole or not subjected to any copyrights protection. This could extensively favor the production company to reduce the production cost. If the filmmaker could not find the public domain recording of the piece, they re-record and use the classical music in their films. The advantages in reproducing the classical track is that the film production company company doesn't have to pay for the display, performance, reproduction, and many other rights. Moreover, there can be profits by streaming and selling performance sensing rights. But sometimes, re-recording a classical piece could be disadvantageous in some ways too. Especially in the digital era, writing and recording a hybrid soundtrack, by which I mean here is the track that has been recorded with real acoustic instruments and virtual instruments or electronic synthesizers, could be sometimes cheaper than recording a classical masterpiece with 105-piece orchestra. Therefore, if a film requires a classical music with a large instrumentation, that might cost more than strategically writing an alternative original score with a less production cost. Additionally, movies such as Amadeus, Immortal Beloved, Copying Beethoven, Eroica, Mahler, Listomania, Bride of the Wind, Clara, Chopin, Desire for Love are some of the movies about the great composers themselves. These films use an extensive amount of the classical pieces. In such movies, the classical pieces are used as diegetic music, which is a part of the story that demands those classical pieces. In my opinion, there could be many more reasons for a film to have classical music in it, but every filmmaker had and will have his own reasons for using a specific classical piece in their film, and those reasons will remain a mystery unless the creator himself says it's loud. The above discussed issue arises another question on originality of an art. Is it acceptable to have classical music in a film? In my opinion, classical music used as a part of the narrative in a diegetic setting in an artistic way that embraces the philosophy, aesthetic and artistic value of the music can be considered to have higher artistic values. For example, in the above discussed scene of Equilibrium and Clockwork Orange, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony becomes a part of the story and narrative, embracing the greatness of the piece. Similarly, the above-mentioned biographical movies about the classical composers themselves have the need of classical pieces as diegetic music. Furthermore, brilliant use of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor with symbolic meaning that hints the consequent events in the movie Aviator is remarkable and thus add aesthetic value to the scene as well. On the other hand, the 10th soundtrack in the movie Ocean 8, which is the fusion of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, is a definite highlight. It is a highly enjoyable work with organ, percussion and bass, and not dramatic as the actual Bach's music. So, what is the real need and purpose of using this track is an arguable question here. Imitation of classical work in poorly manner is considered an act of theft and artistic incapability by many music critics and musicologists such as John Huntley and Max Winkler. Hans Zimmer in the movie Pirates of the Caribbean have used the thematic material of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor and imitated a similar sounding track, but currently he is one of the biggest and highest paid film composer in this planet. This arises another question: whether a film score has to be original to satisfy the dramatic need of a film to entertain the viewers. Here is the bibliography of this research.